Why you don't need friends. After 76 reasons to embrace independence and live happier. For the elderly, as the tapestry of life unfolds and the years gently accumulate, a profound and often overlooked transformation occurs within the human spirit. Our priorities, once rigid and seemingly immutable, begin a subtle yet undeniable shift. The energetic pursuit of a sprawling social network, a common aspiration in younger decades, gradually recedes from the forefront of our desires, its former urgency replaced by an emerging appreciation for quietude and self-reliance. This evolving perspective culminates in a liberating realization for many navigating their golden years. The fundamental truth that, indeed, one doesn't inherently require a large circle of friends after the age of 70. This assertion, which might initially strike one as counterintuitive or even stark, reveals its profound wisdom upon closer examination. Embracing a deeper sense of personal independence and consciously reorienting one's focus towards intrinsic well-being, rather than external social validation, can unfurl into one of the most sagacious and rewarding decisions of a lifetime. This exploration is not about advocating for isolation or endorsing a retreat from human connection. Rather, it's an illuminated pathway towards understanding how one's mindset, an amplified sense of personal freedom, and even one's physical and mental health can experience remarkable improvements when the energy previously expended on maintaining friendships that no longer genuinely resonate or serve a deeper purpose is redirected. It is a profound invitation to live life authentically on one's own meticulously defined terms, unshackled from the unnecessary weight of social expectations and the often burdensome obligations that can accompany conventional social ties. By delving into these multifaceted dimensions, we discover that the act of gracefully letting go of the persistent pressure to maintain an extensive social calendar is not merely an act of liberation. It holds the potential to fundamentally redefine one's self-perception and reshape the very essence of one's later years, imbuing them with unprecedented richness and profound contentment. One of the most compelling and foundational reasons underpinning this evolving social dynamic is the deep-seated understanding that, by the 7th decade of life, the era of needing to constantly prove oneself to others has definitively passed. The relentless quest for social validation, a pervasive undercurrent throughout much of our formative and midlife years, naturally dissipates as we accumulate decades of experience and self-knowledge. Recall for a moment the fervent preoccupations of youth and early adulthood. How frequently did the very fabric of friendships, professional relationships, and social engagements revolve around an almost instinctive drive to establish oneself, to assimilate seamlessly, or to meticulously uphold a certain outward appearance? Whether it manifested as the subtle art of impressing colleagues in a competitive professional landscape, the intricate dance of maintaining specific social circles for perceived status, or the unspoken imperative to ensure one's inclusion in various gatherings and events, an often unacknowledged pressure to be seen, accepted, and valued by external eyes was perpetually present. However, reaching the venerable stage of one's 70s signifies a magnificent transition. It is a period where the foundational elements of one's legacy have already been diligently constructed, not necessarily in grand public accolades, but in the quiet accumulation of a life lived, lessons learned, and wisdom gained. Consequently, the fleeting opinions of others, which once held such formidable sway, now carry a significantly diminished weight. At this mature juncture, one has witnessed enough of life's intricate tapestry to grasp with unwavering clarity that true and enduring fulfillment does not emanate from the fickle wellspring of external approval. Rather, it blossoms from the fertile ground of one's inner self. The ceaseless pursuit of friendships purely for the sake of social status, professional reputation, or communal standing becomes utterly superfluous. You, as an individual, are unequivocally who you are, a composite of experiences, insights, and intrinsic worth, and there's no longer any conceivable need for another person's transient validation to confirm this deeply held truth. In stark contrast to the younger generations who often find themselves consumed by anxieties surrounding how they are perceived, whether they are sufficiently liked, genuinely admired, or universally respected, by the time one gracefully navigates into their later years, a profound and liberating realization dawns. None of these external judgments ultimately define one's inherent worth. The power to define one's own value, to recognize and cherish one's unique contributions to the world, rests entirely within. There is no longer a requirement for an external chorus of voices or a specific group of people to incessantly reinforce this truth. Consider the poignant journey of Harold, a man in his early 70s whose life was largely characterized by an arduous ascent up the corporate ladder. For decades, his existence was seemingly a bustling hive of activity, constantly enveloped by a multitude of people, colleagues, casual acquaintances, and a shifting cast of individuals he reflexively labeled as friends. Yet the vast majority of these intricate relationships, upon deeper reflection, were fundamentally transactional, built more on the shaky foundations of professional convenience and shared obligation rather than the sturdy edifice of genuine, heartfelt connection. The moment the celebratory fanfare of his retirement faded, revealing the quieter rhythm of his new reality, those numerous work-centric friendships, almost with a collective sigh, began to dissipate. Initially, Harold felt a familiar pang of responsibility, an ingrained urge to reach out, to meticulously nurture those fading ties and keep them tenuously alive. However, as the initial discomfort settled, a profound realization began to crystallize within him. He questioned the inherent logic. Why should he continue to invest precious time and dwindling energy into friendships that, in essence, had only truly existed because of the inescapable gravitational pull of his professional life? Why should he tirelessly chase after relationships that, from their very inception, had lacked the vital spark of authentic, profound meaning? This pivotal internal inquiry led to a transformative shift. Instead of clinging desperately to friendships born out of mere habit or lingering obligation, Harold consciously and deliberately redirected his focus inward. He embarked on a deeply personal journey of self-reacquaintance, dedicating more time to neglected personal hobbies, eagerly rediscovering long-dormant interests that had been overshadowed by his career, and, most crucially, he consciously liberated himself from the pervasive need to constantly impress others. He discovered, with a quiet sense of astonishment, that without the omnipresent pressure of maintaining an extensive social facade, he experienced an unprecedented sense of freedom. The days of forced small talk, the unspoken weight of social obligations, and the incessant worry about whether he was adequately liked or admired by others simply evaporated. He was, quite simply, living solely for himself, guided by his own rhythms and desires. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, that deeply authentic existence felt profoundly, unequivocally good. This, then, is the profound key. When the inherent human need to seek validation from external sources finally diminishes, one begins to recognize the astonishing amount of vital energy that was inadvertently squandered on friendships that, in truth, failed to contribute any genuine substantive value to one's life. By this remarkable stage, there is no longer any imperative to prove one's worth to anyone, no longer a compulsion to meticulously conform to anyone else's expectations. The only profound and meaningful dialogue, the only true accountability, is with oneself. The shift in priorities that accompanies the journey into our later years profoundly reconfigures our perception of daily life, revealing that peace, often sought but rarely fully embraced in earlier decades, truly becomes more valuable than the relentless pursuit of socializing. In the vibrant, often chaotic tapestry of youth and early adulthood, being perpetually surrounded by people, immersed in the energetic hum of social gatherings, and engaged in a ceaseless flow of conversations felt intrinsically linked to a life well lived, a testament to one's engagement with the world. However, as the gentle current of time carries us forward, a deeper, more resonant appreciation for a different kind of richness emerges, the profound allure of quietude. And not merely any form of quiet, but that specific, restorative tranquility that allows one to truly settle into a state of profound ease, completely unburdened by the extraneous noise of unnecessary drama, the invisible chains of social obligations, and the insidious creep of social fatigue. It's an undeniable truth that many friendships, even those characterized by genuine affection and shared history, arrive packaged with a certain, often unspoken, level of responsibility. There are the persistent phone calls that demand prompt returns, the myriad invitations that implicitly compel acceptance, and the subtle yet firm expectations to maintain a consistent cadence of contact. it's not an indictment of friendships themselves. Rather, it's an acknowledgement that at a certain elevated point in life, these social commitments can undeniably begin to feel like a disproportionate expenditure of effort relative to the diminishing returns of genuine enjoyment. The liberating truth, often obscured by years of ingrained social conditioning, is that there is no inherent obligation to ceaselessly strive to keep pace with the social demands of others. There is no longer a need to feel perpetually available or to contort one's schedule simply because someone else expects it. By the time one reaches this distinguished stage of life, the precious commodity of time truly becomes one's own, a personal reservoir from which one is uniquely empowered to decide how to draw. Consider the illuminating experience of Margaret, a woman of 74 who, for many years, diligently cultivated and maintained a large and active circle of friends. Her calendar was a vibrant testament to her social commitment, perpetually filled with a bustling array of lunches, animated group calls, and festive holiday gatherings. Yet, as the years gently unfolded, a subtle but significant realization began to dawn upon her. An increasing number of these once cherished social interactions, rather than infusing her with renewed energy and profound fulfillment, now left her feeling inexplicably drained. The conversational currents, once fresh and engaging, now felt increasingly repetitive, a familiar echo of the same stories being recounted, the same anecdotes recirculated. Some friends, she observed, seemed to connect primarily to vocalize their grievances or to immerse themselves in trivial complaints, while others appeared far more captivated by the superficial currents of gossip than by the potential for genuinely meaningful or introspective discussions. What had once been the joyous ebb and flow of companionship had almost imperceptibly transformed into a predictable and, frankly, unenjoyable routine. One serendipitous day, Margaret made a decisive and liberating choice. She consciously decided to step back. The insidious tendrils of guilt that had long bound her to social obligations she no longer truly desired began to wither. She stopped feeling compelled to apologize for gracefully declining invitations that failed to spark genuine enthusiasm within her. She consciously released the self-imposed pressure to immediately respond to every incoming call or text, allowing herself the luxury of considered response. Instead, with a burgeoning sense of peace, she began to wholeheartedly embrace the quiet. She discovered, with a delightful sense of revelation, that the substantial blocks of time she had once meticulously dedicated to managing and maintaining her extensive network of friendships were now unequivocally hers, to be utilized precisely as her heart dictated. She indulged in longer, more contemplative walks amidst the serene beauty of nature, allowing her thoughts to unfurl unhindered. She immersed herself in the forgotten pleasure of reading, finally tackling the stack of books that had patiently awaited her attention for years. Most significantly, she arrived at the profound understanding that solitude, often misconstrued as loneliness, was in fact a wellspring of profound peace. And therein lies the quintessential beauty of this refined stage of life. One is no longer bound by the burdensome obligation to relentlessly fill one's days with an incessant flurry of activity or a constant stream of conversation merely to feel connected. Instead, one gains the invaluable privilege of genuinely savoring one's own company, unburdened by the persistent need for external validation or affirmation from others. The power to consciously choose peace over pressure, to opt for the tranquil calm over the dizzying chaos of excessive social demands, becomes an inherent right. Therefore, if the subtle pangs of guilt have ever accompanied your decision to gracefully withdraw from a social obligation, allow yourself the profound reassurance of this truth. You are not in any sense retreating from life itself. On the contrary, you are courageously stepping into a new, more profound dimension of fulfillment, a richness that originates from within, a contentment that is exquisitely self-sustaining, rather than reliant on the transient presence or approval of anyone else. And this particular brand of peace, cultivated and cherished, only deepens and becomes more exquisitely satisfying with the graceful passage of age. Building upon this growing appreciation for inner peace and personal autonomy, a natural, albeit sometimes challenging, realization emerges. Fewer friendships inherently equate to fewer disappointments. Throughout the intricate journey of life, one of the most poignant and often painful lessons to absorb is the stark reality that not every individual one affectionately labels as a friend will consistently demonstrate an unwavering presence or a truly reciprocal commitment. Over the many decades, it is almost inevitable to have experienced the subtle yet undeniable pang of individuals once held dear, gradually drifting away, their once vibrant connection fading into a muted echo. There are the painful instances of friends who, when life presented its most arduous trials, became mysteriously distant, their support conspicuously absent precisely when it was most desperately needed. And, perhaps most subtly insidious, are the relationships that, upon honest introspection, reveal themselves to be fundamentally one-sided, an unequal exchange of effort, emotion, and presence. By the time one gracefully reaches the age of 70, a profound and liberating understanding crystallizes. A more curated, discerning approach to friendships doesn't simply translate to a lighter load of social obligations. It fundamentally and profoundly minimizes the potential for recurrent disappointments. Friendships, regardless of their purported strength or their historical longevity, are invariably accompanied by a tacit tapestry of expectations. There's the unspoken expectation to routinely check in, to maintain a certain level of availability, to unfailingly offer support during times of need, and to reciprocate gestures of kindness and connection. But what happens inevitably when these unspoken or even explicitly articulated expectations consistently fall short? The answer is a predictable and often painful disappointment. One extends a hand through a phone call, only for it to remain unanswered. One meticulously invests effort and emotional energy, only to be met with a conspicuous absence of reciprocity. One frequently finds oneself in the uncomfortable position of giving disproportionately more than one receives. And at this refined and valuable stage of life, when precious mental and emotional resources should be channeled towards genuine joy and tranquility, is there truly a compelling need to invite this recurring cycle of stress and emotional attrition? The resounding answer for many is an emphatic no. Take, for instance, the reflective journey of William, a man of 78 who had, over the course of his extensive life, witnessed a multitude of friendships emerge, flourish, and eventually recede. Some of these connections dissolved with a natural grace, gently fading as life's divergent paths inevitably separated individuals. Others, however, withered and ultimately vanished because William, with a newfound clarity, recognized that he had consistently been the solitary architect of their maintenance, the sole individual pouring effort into their sustenance. There were countless individuals he had known intimately for decades, whose lives were once intricately interwoven with his own, who suddenly became perpetually too busy, inexplicably too distracted, or undeniably too uninterested to sustain any semblance of a truly meaningful connection. Initially, this erosion of long-standing ties stung deeply. A familiar questioning arose within him. Had he inadvertently done something wrong? Was there some flaw in his character that caused certain people to inexplicably forget his existence? But then, amidst this internal turmoil, a profound and liberating realization illuminated his mind. It wasn't he who had undergone a fundamental shift. Rather, he had simply, and quite powerfully, ceased tolerating friendships that lacked the foundational principle of mutual reciprocation. And this precisely is the liberating essence of this stage. When one consciously relinquishes the deeply ingrained societal notion that a vast and sprawling group of friends is an indispensable prerequisite for a fulfilling life, one simultaneously liberates oneself from the often bitter disappointments that are the inevitable consequence of perpetually unmet expectations. The familiar pang of frustration when someone fails to check in, or the quiet letdown when a once vibrant friendship gently yet irrevocably fades, ceases to hold its former power. Instead, this newfound liberation allows one to redirect invaluable energy and focus toward the most profoundly important person in one's life, oneself. This shift, crucially, is not an advocacy for isolation or a retreat from all human contact. On the contrary, it represents a discerning and conscious choice to prioritize quality over the illusory allure of quantity. Instead of laboring under the burden of maintaining an exhaustive roster of casual acquaintances, one is empowered to meticulously prioritize and deeply nourish the relationships that genuinely matter. Those rare and precious connections that consistently bring authentic joy and, critically, require no strenuous effort to sustain. Whether these invaluable bonds manifest as cherished family members, a lifelong friend whose presence feels like a comforting extension of oneself, or even most profoundly, a robust and unwavering connection with one's own inner self. These are the relationships that, in the grand scheme of things, truly count, truly resonate, and truly enrich the soul. Therefore, if you have ever felt that the intricate dance of friendships has at times exacted a heavier toll of stress than it has bestowed moments of genuine joy, allow yourself the profound reassurance that it is not only permissible, but often deeply beneficial to gracefully step back. It is unequivocally acceptable to choose the elegant simplicity of fewer, deeper connections over the exhausting complexity of numerous superficial ones, to consciously opt for peace of mind over the corrosive friction of frustration. A sprawling list of friends is not, and never has been, a prerequisite for genuine fulfillment. Sometimes the most profound act of self-care is simply to gently release the grip on those relationships that were never truly there for you in the first place, allowing space for more authentic joy to bloom. Following this path of discerning connection and internal peace, an even more profound understanding blossoms. The realization that your time, the finite and irreplaceable currency of existence, becomes incomparably more precious as you age. In the exuberant rush of younger years, time often felt like an infinite, boundless resource, stretching endlessly into an unwritten future. There seemed to be an inexhaustible supply of it. More than enough time to casually spend with friends, to diligently invest in expanding various social circles, and even perhaps an abundance of time to fret and worry about the shifting dynamics of who was actively present in one's life and who, perhaps, was not. However, by the time one arrives at the venerable age of 70, a seismic shift in perspective naturally occurs. You begin to perceive every single hour, every passing day, every fleeting moment as an invaluable, non-renewable treasure. And when this profound understanding of the true, intrinsic value of your time solidifies within, it naturally propels you towards a more deliberate and discerning selectivity in how you choose to expend it. Friendships, as intrinsically fulfilling as they undeniably can be in their purest forms, inevitably demand both time and a significant investment of effort. There are the regular calls to be made, the numerous visits to meticulously schedule, and a constant array of plans to diligently keep. And while a select few of these connections are unequivocally worth the devoted maintenance, a substantial number, upon honest reflection, are simply lingering habits carried forward from a bygone era, relationships that we dutifully preserve out of a misplaced sense of obligation rather than from a genuine, bubbling spring of enjoyment. At this esteemed stage of life, you possess the unequivocal right, indeed the imperative, to ask yourself a deeply probing question. Is this truly how I wish to spend my irreplaceable time? Does this particular friendship genuinely augment my overall happiness and sense of well-being? Or does it increasingly feel like just another burdensome item appended to an ever-growing to-do list? Consider the illuminating narrative of Richard, a dignified man in his early 80s who, for much of his life, cultivated a remarkably active social existence. His calendar was once a vibrant mosaic of elaborate dinner parties, lively group outings, and a consistent stream of convivial phone calls. Yet, with the inexorable march of time, a subtle but significant shift began to occur in his perceptions. The protracted conversations that had once felt so effortlessly enjoyable now began to exact a heavy toll, often leaving him feeling inexplicably drained. The very social gatherings that had previously ignited a spark of genuine excitement now increasingly felt like unavoidable obligations, dutifully attended rather than eagerly anticipated. One poignant day as he found himself enduring yet another lunch, filled with the well-worn cliches of small talk and the repetitive cadence of trivial complaints, a profound and undeniable realization crystallized within him. He simply no longer desired to spend his precious, finite time in this manner. This epiphany spurred a courageous change in his behavior. He consciously ceased saying yes out of mere habit or ingrained politeness, and instead embraced the liberating power of saying no when his authentic self genuinely did not feel inclined to participate. Rather than dedicating countless hours to catching up on frivolous gossip or passively listening to the oft-repeated litany of others' grievances, he deliberately reallocated his time and energy to pursuits that genuinely brought him deep-seated joy and a sense of personal enrichment. He immersed himself in the quiet contemplation of reading, took long, restorative walks amidst the serenity of nature, passionately embarked on learning new skills and subjects, and, most profoundly, he wholeheartedly savored the profound peace that accompanied his own company. And the truly astonishing revelation in all of this? He did not for a single moment feel lonely. In fact, quite contrary, he experienced a level of fulfillment far surpassing anything he had known before, precisely because he was now spending his time in ways that resonated deeply with his own intrinsic desires, rather than merely fulfilling the external expectations of others. This then is the profound kernel of truth. When you courageously relinquish the burden of unnecessary or draining friendships, you gain something immeasurably more valuable, an abundance of time for yourself. Time to wholeheartedly pursue the passions you cherish, time to luxuriate in life's simple pleasures at your own unhurried pace, and most importantly, time to consciously focus on cultivating your own happiness, unburdened by the relentless imperative to constantly cater to the needs or whims of others. Therefore, if you ever find yourself grappling with the question of whether to continue investing in certain friendships, pose this deeply reflective question to yourself. Is this truly the optimal and most enriching use of my invaluable time? Because at this revered stage of life, you owe your time to no one. You have unequivocally earned the sovereign right to utilize it precisely as you choose, a testament to a lifetime of contributions and experiences. The journey into our later years, particularly beyond the age of 70, profoundly illuminates a truth often obscured in earlier life. That true companionship, the most enduring and satisfying kind, ultimately comes from within. A pervasive misconception, stubbornly clung to by many, is the notion that happiness in old age is inextricably linked to possessing a large and bustling circle of friends. Yet, the deeper, more profound reality reveals that the single most vital and enriching companionship one can ever cultivate is the profound relationship built meticulously with oneself. By the time you reach your 7th decade, you have traversed countless landscapes of learning, undergone myriad transformations of growth, and continuously evolved through the crucible of experience. This extended journey means you possess an unparalleled understanding of yourself, a depth of self-knowledge that no one else could ever hope to fully attain. And with this profound self-awareness comes an incredibly liberating and empowering realization. You in your entirety are unequivocally enough. For the vast majority of our lives, societal narratives and deeply ingrained cultural norms instruct us to primarily seek companionship outside of ourselves. We are often told implicitly and explicitly that being inherently social is the quintessential key to unlocking happiness, and that the state of loneliness is a condition to be strenuously avoided and profoundly feared. However, it is crucial to recognize the nuanced, yet critical distinction between simply being alone and suffering from a genuine sense of loneliness. Some of the most genuinely joyful and deeply contented individuals in their later years are precisely those who have not merely tolerated, but have wholeheartedly embraced solitude, not as a form of social isolation, but as a cherished and fertile opportunity for profound self-discovery, introspective reflection, and a deep, abiding inner peace. Consider the gentle wisdom embodied by Eleanor, a woman of 76, who, for many years, sincerely believed that her fulfillment was directly proportional to the number of people she consistently surrounded herself with. Her days were a perpetual ballet of meticulously planned social engagements, diligent check-ins with friends, and a relentless effort to fill every waking hour with activity. Yet, after a significant period of this ceaseless social exertion, she began to observe a disconcerting pattern. Despite her outwardly active social life, she frequently found herself feeling inexplicably drained rather than genuinely uplifted. A stark realization began to crystallize within her that a significant number of her friendships, upon honest examination, were anchored more in the inertia of routine than in the vibrant wellspring of genuine, heartfelt connection. And, perhaps more dishearteningly, she discovered that she was constantly and subtly adjusting her authentic self, reshaping her opinions and mannerisms to seamlessly fit into ongoing conversations, striving to diligently keep pace with various social expectations, and, ultimately, expending considerable emotional energy to assiduously avoid the perceived discomfort of feeling left out. Then, one transformative day, she simply stopped. She made a conscious and courageous decision to intentionally dedicate time to herself, treating her own presence with the same reverence and affection she would bestow upon a cherished, lifelong friend. She embarked on activities she genuinely loved, allowing her own thoughts to unfurl unhindered and wholeheartedly relishing the profound contentment of her own company. She indulged in long, contemplative walks through verdant parks without feeling the slightest compulsion to call anyone or report her activities. She sought out cozy cafes, not for the obligatory small talk, but for the quiet, immersive pleasure of a good book. She spent serene, introspective evenings reflecting deeply on the intricate tapestry of her life, rather than succumbing to the relentless pressure of maintaining friendships purely out of obligation or ingrained habit. And to her own profound astonishment, she found herself feeling immeasurably lighter, unequivocally happier, and more deeply at peace than she had experienced in years. This, then, is the profound insight that many people, caught in the relentless churn of societal expectations, fail to grasp. True companionship is not measured by the sheer volume of people who populate your immediate vicinity. Rather, it is intrinsically defined by the profound degree of comfort and genuine ease you cultivate within yourself. When you consciously liberate yourself from the unconscious reliance on others for your entertainment, for your sense of validation, or even for the simple act of conversation, you unlock an extraordinary level of personal freedom, a depth of autonomy that, sadly, most individuals never fully experience. You no longer require external distractions to fill the inherent spaciousness of your time. Instead, you become your own inexhaustible source of joy, your own wellspring of wisdom, and the ultimate architect of your own profound fulfillment. And the unparalleled beauty of this internal transformation is that when you genuinely learn to enjoy your own company, to truly cherish the unique essence of who you are, you naturally begin to attract relationships that are characterized by an effortless grace and an authentic resonance. Instead of desperately chasing after friendships out of a foundational sense of loneliness or perceived incompleteness, you discover with a quiet sense of wonder that the right people, the ones who genuinely align with your spirit, naturally and organically gravitate into your life. These are individuals who instinctively respect your sacred personal space, who inherently understand and value your deepest principles, and who consistently bring an enriching sense of peace rather than an unnecessary burden of pressure. Therefore, if you have ever harbored anxieties that the act of judiciously letting go of certain friendships might leave you feeling isolated or fundamentally alone, allow this profound truth to anchor your spirit. The very best company you could ever hope to have is already, and has always been, intimately present within you. And when you fully embrace this profound, self-sufficient truth, you will inevitably realize, with a quiet sense of awe, that you were never, in any meaningful sense, truly alone in the first place. Building on the deep wellspring of inner companionship and the newfound appreciation for one's precious time, the most empowering realization for those beyond 70 is that letting go opens the door to a more profoundly fulfilling life. This act of release, both simple in concept, yet often challenging in execution, involves consciously liberating oneself from a multitude of external pressures and deeply ingrained assumptions. It means shedding the pervasive expectation to meticulously maintain friendships that, upon honest reflection, no longer contribute a genuine spark of joy or enrichment to one's existence. It involves relinquishing the deeply ingrained idea that one's inherent social worth is defined or measured by the size and perceived vibrancy of one's social circle. And crucially, it necessitates letting go of the persistent, often fear-driven belief that simply being alone is synonymous with experiencing an unwelcome and debilitating loneliness. Because in the very moment one courageously releases the tenacious grip of these external expectations and self-imposed limitations, a magnificent portal swings open, revealing a life that is undeniably simpler, profoundly freer, and immeasurably more fulfilling in its truest essence. It is an undeniable observation that many individuals, conditioned by years of social expectation, cling to friendships out of sheer habit, even when those specific relationships have long ceased to add any discernible value to their lives. They dutifully attend social gatherings that hold no genuine appeal, answer phone calls prompted purely by a sense of obligation, and meticulously maintain outward appearances simply because that's what they've always done. But what if for a moment one were to contemplate a radical alternative? What if you were to grant yourself the profound permission to gracefully let go of those friendships that have, over time, transformed into an arduous chore, feeling more like demanding work than spontaneous joy? And what if, instead, you consciously redirected that liberated energy towards cultivating the very things that genuinely ignite your happiness and bring profound meaning to your days? Consider the transformative journey of James, a distinguished gentleman in his late 70s who, for the longest time, held an unwavering belief that consistently staying socially active was the non-negotiable key to aging gracefully and successfully. He made a conscious and considerable effort to maintain diligent contact with a wide array of old friends, even when those friendships had, with the inevitable passage of time, become demonstrably distant or, at their core, undeniably superficial. He meticulously filled his days with a demanding schedule of social obligations, operating under the deeply ingrained assumption that constant busyness was an infallible proxy for genuine fulfillment. However, one day, amidst this whirlwind of social activity, a profound and undeniable realization pierced through the veneer of his routine. He simply wasn't enjoying it anymore. The conversations once engaging now felt excruciatingly repetitive, a monotonous echo of past exchanges. The numerous social gatherings, far from being sources of vibrant connection, had devolved into predictable, almost ritualistic routines. And deep within, beneath the surface of his bustling social calendar, he felt not a sense of connection, but rather a pervasive and profound exhaustion. This pivotal insight propelled him to make a courageous and life-altering choice. He decisively stopped forcing himself to maintain friendships that no longer resonated with genuine meaning or mutual enjoyment. Instead, with a newfound clarity, he began to meticulously prioritize what truly mattered to him, what truly nourished his spirit. He dedicated significantly more time to immersing himself in the restorative embrace of the outdoors, meticulously focused on enhancing his physical and mental health, enthusiastically embarked on the exhilarating journey of learning new subjects and skills, and, perhaps most profoundly, wholeheartedly embraced the boundless freedom that came with no longer feeling compelled to meet anyone else's expectations. And in the crucible of this transformative shift, he unearthed something truly incredible. He felt immeasurably lighter, unequivocally happier, and more deeply at peace than he had experienced in the entirety of his life. This, then, is the exquisite paradox of letting go. It does not in any sense equate to closing oneself off from the rich tapestry of the world. Rather, it is an intentional and empowering act of creating sacred space for precisely what genuinely fulfills you, what truly nourishes your soul. It is a profound recognition that your authentic happiness is not, and never was, intrinsically tied to the sheer number of people who happen to populate your immediate orbit. Instead, it is inextricably linked to the profound degree of alignment you achieve with the very life you genuinely desire to live, a life crafted with intention and steeped in personal meaning. And here lies the beautiful cascading effect that unfolds when one wholeheartedly embraces this liberating mindset. You cease the often futile endeavor of worrying about who is or isn't actively present in your life, and instead, you courageously shift your focus to what truly ignites your inner joy. You begin to appreciate with a newfound clarity the subtle yet profound beauty of the little things, the serene calm of waking up to a quiet morning, the unadulterated pleasure of immersing oneself in a cherished hobby without any distracting interruptions, the profound contentment of feeling utterly at peace with your own unfolding thoughts. You realize with a quiet sense of revelation that true fulfillment does not emerge from the dutiful maintenance of friendships born of obligation, but rather from the organic and authentic experience of living in a manner that feels inherently natural, deeply resonant, and profoundly meaningful to your unique self. Therefore, if you have ever found yourself grappling with the persistent internal question of whether you should be doing more to diligently maintain certain friendships, pose this deeply honest question to your inner self. Is this particular endeavor genuinely adding to my overall happiness and sense of well-being? Or am I merely clinging to it out of ingrained habit or a misplaced sense of duty? Because once you grant yourself the profound and liberating permission to let go, you will discover, with a quiet sense of wonder, that life naturally unfolds into a simpler, lighter, and incomparably more fulfilling existence than you could have ever previously imagined. As we bring this extensive exploration to its thoughtful conclusion, it is pertinent to pause and allow a moment for deep reflection on the multifaceted insights we have meticulously discussed. The profound idea that one does not necessarily need a constant bustling circle of friends after the age of 70 is not, at its heart, a stark proclamation of isolation or a retreat into solitude. Instead, it stands as a powerful and liberating manifesto of personal freedom. It is about deliberately and consciously choosing to release oneself from the weighty burdens of unnecessary social obligations, about discerningly prioritizing inner peace over the incessant external pressures to conform, and about courageously embracing a life that is truly and authentically aligned with one's deepest desires and evolving truths. By navigating through these interconnected reasons, you have undoubtedly gained a clearer perspective on how the judicious act of gracefully stepping away from friendships that no longer genuinely serve your highest good can, paradoxically, unlock an unexpected abundance of joy, a wealth of previously undiscovered time, and a profound, resonant fulfillment that might have seemed unimaginable before. Perhaps as you've absorbed these insights, certain aspects have resonated more deeply than others. Maybe you have already, perhaps intuitively, begun the gentle process of releasing those friendships that felt more like demanding work than mutual joy. Or perhaps you've already had the delightful experience of noticing just how much you genuinely enjoy your own company when you consciously afford yourself the space and opportunity to do so. Or it could be that this comprehensive discourse has simply offered you a fresh, empowering perspective on why it is not only acceptable, but often deeply beneficial to prioritize your own evolving needs and inner peace. Your journey, your reflections, and your personal insights are invaluable to us. We wholeheartedly invite you to share your thoughts, perhaps articulating one key learning you gleaned today and how you envision integrating it into the rich tapestry of your own life. Your voice adds significant depth and texture to this ongoing dialogue, and your comments serve as a powerful source of motivation and encouragement for our continued efforts to inform and inspire. If this journey of discovery has enriched your understanding and offered a valuable perspective, we encourage you to express your appreciation through a like, a subscription, and by sharing this message with others who might benefit from its empowering insights. Your support is instrumental in enabling us to continue crafting content designed to uplift and enlighten. Thank you for your engaged attention, and we eagerly anticipate connecting with you in our next shared exploration.